It was one of those gray mornings when the sky seemed to mirror the weight inside Daniel's chest, a sky that whispered of storms even before the rain began to fall. Daniel had woken up at dawn, like he did every day, not because he had the luxury of choice but because his little daughter Emma stirred in her sleep, whimpering for her mother who was no longer there. 2 years had passed since his wife, Clara, had lost her battle with illness, and every morning Daniel found himself fighting back the same aching silence that filled the small apartment where their laughter used to echo. Emma was only 4 years old, too small to understand why her mother never came back from the hospital, and too innocent to carry the burden of her father's endless struggles. But Daniel carried it, every single day. He dressed in his one good shirt and pressed it neatly, though its fabric was worn and its collar frayed. He carefully folded Emma's little hoodie, the red one she loved so much, and packed her favorite stuffed bunny in the old box of toys she insisted on carrying everywhere. Their life was not easy. Daniel had to juggle his job at a corporate office with taking care of Emma, a task that demanded twice the strength he thought he had. He had begged his boss more than once to allow him a bit of leniency with his hours. He wasn't lazy, he just couldn't leave his daughter alone. His paycheck was meager, barely enough to cover rent and groceries, but it was all they had, and he clung to it like a lifeline. This morning, Emma had refused to let go of him, crying softly until she fell asleep in his arms, her tiny fingers clutching his shirt like he was the only anchor she had left in the world. And so, Daniel carried her as he walked into the office, her head resting on his shoulder, her body limp with the innocence of childhood sleep, while his other hand clutched a simple cardboard box that held his work files, his lunch, and a few personal items. He knew what awaited him, he could already sense it. His supervisor had been glaring at him for weeks, making harsh remarks about bringing personal issues into the workplace, mocking him for being a single father who couldn't keep his professional and personal life separate. But Daniel had no choice. Emma was his life, and he would not abandon her for anything. The office buzzed with whispers as he entered, colleagues glancing his way, some with pity, others with disdain. He kept his head down, trying to avoid their eyes, and made his way to his desk, hoping, perhaps foolishly, that today would pass without incident. But fate had other plans. The moment he sat down, his boss, Mr. Harrington, stormed across the floor, his voice sharp and booming. "Daniel. My office. Now." Daniel rose carefully, adjusting Emma in his arms, not wanting to wake her, and followed his boss into the glass-walled room. The door shut with a snap. Mr. Harrington's expression was cold, his arms crossed, his jaw tight with irritation. "I've warned you before. This is a workplace, not a daycare. You're always distracted, always late, and frankly, it's affecting everyone else's productivity. Enough is enough. You're done here." The words cut like a knife, and for a moment Daniel could not breathe. Fired. Just like that. He opened his mouth to plead, to explain that he had no one else to care for Emma, that he worked late nights after she fell asleep just to meet deadlines, that he was doing everything in his power to be both mother and father. But Mr. Harrington's eyes were cold steel, unmoved and unfeeling. "Pack your things and leave," he said, dismissing him with a wave of his hand as if he were nothing more than a nuisance. Daniel's throat tightened as he swallowed the lump of shame and despair. He turned and walked out, every step heavier than the last, the stares of his colleagues burning into his back. He carried the box in one hand, his daughter in the other, and stepped into the pouring rain outside the building. Drops fell hard against his skin, soaking his shirt, plastering his hair to his forehead, but he didn't care. He only looked down at Emma, still asleep against his shoulder, her little face peaceful, untouched by the cruel reality pressing in on him. He whispered softly, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Daddy's here. I'll figure something out." His voice cracked, though, betraying the storm raging inside him. What future could he give her without a job, without money, without stability? He walked slowly, not sure where his feet were leading him, lost in a haze of despair. That was when a sleek black car pulled up near the sidewalk, the hum of its engine cutting through the rain. Daniel didn't notice at first, but the woman stepping out did notice him. She was elegant, dressed in a tailored pink blazer and cream trousers, her long blonde hair flowing despite the rain. She was a woman who clearly belonged to a different world, wealthy, powerful, someone who never had to wonder where her next meal would come from. Yet her eyes softened as they landed on Daniel and the little girl in his arms. She stood for a moment, watching silently as the man clutched the box and his daughter, both drenched in rain, both carrying the weight of a world that seemed merciless. Something in her chest stirred, an old wound, a memory of a time when she too had felt abandoned, lost, unseen. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her voice gentle yet firm. "Let me help you." Daniel froze, startled by the sudden presence of a stranger. He turned, his eyes meeting hers, confusion and guardedness flickering across his face. He was not a man who accepted pity easily, he had too much pride left to take handouts. But the woman didn't flinch under his wary gaze. She only moved closer, her eyes fixed on Emma's tiny form clinging to him. "You don't have to do this alone," she said softly, almost as though she were speaking to herself as much as to him. Daniel's heart pounded. Who was this woman? Why would someone like her care about a broken man holding a cardboard box and a sleeping child? Yet there was something genuine in her eyes, something that told him she wasn't mocking him or offering charity. She was offering something else, something he couldn't quite name yet. And so, in the rain, at the lowest point of his life, Daniel found himself at the start of a story he never expected, one that would change not only his life but his daughter's future forever.